that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, this is Energy Week with George Harvey, me, Tom Finnell, him.
Hello.
And we are talking about energy news for the last week. This is derived from the news that I do every day, looking up what I can find on the internet for a blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com. And you can go there and check out the news that I talk about, if you wish. So we'll just start into it. On Friday, August 1st, a retired coal miner traveled 1,300 miles from his home in Kentucky to Denver to tell the EPA about the black lung disease he suffers from and how pollution from coal plants is adversely affecting public health. His plea, quote, "We're dying, literally dying for you to help us," end quote. You have a picture of that, don't you, Tom?
Yeah, that's not the guy. But
that's not the guy.
Somebody standing in for him.
Well, the number of people who have gone from, and I've seen this repeatedly in the news, people who have gone from Kentucky, West Virginia, wherever, to Denver. These are long trips these people have taken. There are a lot of people who are coal miners who have gone there because they want the EPA to keep the coal mines open. And of course, they're pleading for their jobs, but
it's kind of a dichotomy there, because the incidence of black lung disease and other related pulmonary problems is almost 100%.
What? Really?
Coal miners.
Oh my goodness
You work
gracious!
there long enough, you're going to get it. And of course, it's pretty much good-paying jobs. And it's probably pretty much the only jobs that are available in these areas.
Well, actually, you know, about a year and a half ago, I had a news item that went up into my blog that talked about laid-off coal miners who were getting jobs in Ohio and actually through the Ohio River Valley, working on wind farms.
That's interesting.
Isn't it? And right now,
yeah.
the solar industry is employing more people than the coal industry.
Well, I think we talked about that last week.
We did indeed. And the solar industry is the fastest growing industry in the United States. And of course, that'll slow down enormously if Congress doesn't get its act together to extend its help for the renewable power, just as didn't happen at the end of last year with wind power. So wind has shrunk to about 10% of what it was in terms of growth.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with incentives.
It does, indeed. That came from Think Progress. This item, also on Friday, from the Daily Journal, when a Republican congressman who represents an area of central Kansas co-sponsored a bill that would cut demand for biofuels by phasing out federal renewable energy program, many of his rural constituents took note. Now he's in a tough race with a political novice. Now, you know, I don't know what happened with that race, but I do know that the primary in Kansas is already over. I should actually look that up.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing here, because what they're doing is they're growing ethanol.
Yes.
They're growing corn to make ethanol.
Yeah.
Which on the one hand has a lot of detrimental effects and may not have even been a good idea.
Yes.
But in this particular area, this is what these people this is their employment.
Yes.
I mean, they're farmers, but all of a sudden they got a market that didn't exist.
They've got a bigger market for ethanol, so they've got a higher price for corn.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a dichotomy here.
Yeah. One of the things about ethanol, and it's something that bothers me a little bit, I don't have a car now, but my last car was a Prius. And I was very conscious of my mileage as I drove that car around. And when ethanol...
It tells you all the time what you're doing, doesn't it?
It does,
yeah.
Absolutely. When we switched to ethanol and I could not buy straight gasoline anymore, I was going from 100% gasoline to 90%
Yeah, to
gasoline and 10% ethanol. And when that happened, the introduction of 10% ethanol reduced my mileage by 10%.
Well, I think that's consistent.
It's
I don't think it's just Priuses.
well, there are cars that can take it without that much reduction.
Yeah.
But what it means is that we're just increasing our fossil fuel output by switching to ethanol.
Well, yeah.
There are other ways of doing things, and one of them would be to process other fuels like butanol, which you can put in.
You can put right in a tank.
You could put right into the tank of many cars, and in other cars you could put it in 30%, 40%, and it has much more power in the per volume.
More energy in it.
More energy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So on Saturday, August 2nd, from the Boston Globe, we got this. This is an opinion piece. The title is "Energy Bill's Failure Sets Back States' Fight on Climate Change." And it says an important Massachusetts energy bill failed, but the problems it tried to address have not gone away, and the clock is ticking. Massachusetts climate goals won't mean much if they aren't met. Now, we talked about this bill before.
Yeah, we did.
I believe that this is the same bill.
I'm not quite sure about that. There's conflicting things going on up
There are a bunch of things going
There
on.
was one of them where they lifted the energy cap on the one hand,
Yes,
which was a goodie.
yes.
But on the back, they had a whole bunch of little things buried in there that were destructive toward renewable energy.
And which, by the way, gained support for that bill from Exelon Corporation.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I got this thing up there. And
Okay.
you might look at that steakhouse sign there.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell you, it has absolutely nothing to do with this story.
Oh, okay, good. That's
Except
nice
it's
to
in
know.
Massachusetts.
Are you sure that's in Massachusetts?
That's in Saugus, yeah.
The
That's
sky
in
makes it look
Saugus,
like it
and
might be in
the
Texas.
reason why it was up in the news
Yeah.
is there's some kind of controversy about the sign.
Oh, I see.
It's
well,
too big or something like that. It's
Yeah,
been there
of
for
course.
20 years. All of a sudden, it's too big.
Yeah. Oh, well.
But the lawmakers lost sight of the overriding goal of cutting carbon emissions, it says here. So
There's
sometimes, like everywhere, politics in Massachusetts can be rather opaque.
just Massachusetts.
No, like almost everywhere.
Yeah. Actually, yes, you did say that, didn't you? Okay. That was from the Boston Globe. This is from Energy Collective, same day. Central Hudson Gas and Electric filed a $46 million rate case called Value for Our Valley, which includes new distribution automation systems, community solar, expanded demand response, and a microgrid as a service program with the New York Public Service Commission.
This is a biggie. This is a sleeper here.
I agree with you, Tom. This is something that you from what I just read, you don't get the full impact of what this means.
No,
Yeah.
I think they're in Poughkeepsie. They're located right in the middle of somewhere between New York and Albany.
Yeah.
And they got a little central location there, and the whole idea that they're doing such things as microgrids, that they're setting up
Microgrid as a service.
as a service.
Yeah,
they're
that's
setting
important.
it up, and you can get involved in it.
Absolutely.
And this is a totally, radically different way of running utility.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And it's something which I would say should be duplicated across the board, in as many places as possible.
It seems to make a lot of sense, and if it does, the economics are going to show that.
Well,
People are going to start copying it.
yeah, and it makes sense from a point of view of resilience. And that, of course, is one of the things that they're really interested in this. And it was in this story.
Build grids for resiliency.
Yeah, exactly.
Both in areas with critical facilities,
Yes.
like hospitals,
Yes.
and in remote regions of its territory.
Yeah. Now, I want to
the
point out,
boondocks.
a microgrid does not mean just one building necessarily. You could build a microgrid
It could
in a
be for one
hospital.
building, yeah.
It could be. But it could also be for a community.
Absolutely.
And so Brattleboro could have its own microgrid. Wyndham County could be divided up into microgrids. It would be very nice to see discussion
be.
of that. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Well, like we saw last week in Potsdam.
Yes.
Potsdam, New York.
Yes.
They got Clarkson College.
Yes.
They got New York State
Yes.
University.
Yes.
They got the town. They got the hospital.
Yes.
Everybody getting together.
Yes.
It's sort of experimental,
I think that's where we're going to go, though.
but if it works, and
And
it probably will.
With distributed power, the microgrid as a service gives a place for the utilities to make their income, and I really think it would be an honest day's pay for an honest day's work, and at the same time, it gives communities a say over their own energy resources.
Now, the idea of somewhat of a independence from the grid that you can turn on and off
Yes,
is it's insurance.
it's insurance.
You know, I mean, it certainly gives you a feeling of safety.
Not only from a thing like Hurricane Irene or Hurricane Sandy, but also from things like rate changes because of big changes in fuel prices. And it also means that you could, if you want to, as a community, keep the money that you spend on fuel and on electrical power local, so that the jobs that are created by the fuel that you're consuming, or I should say by the electricity that you're consuming, are local, and the money for that power is local, and that can increase the prosperity of a community.
I can't argue. I can't argue the point.
I didn't ask you to argue.
It's quite valid.
Yeah. Okay, that was from Energy Collective. The next one is from Ars Technica. The U.S. Energy Information Agency announced that non-hydro renewable had gone 8 months where it outproduced hydroelectric dams. The figures include projects in excess of 1 megawatt of solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, landfill gas, and municipal solid waste. Now, I will point out, this includes only solar farms that are bigger than a megawatt.
Yeah, the little ones on your rooftop don't even count in this survey.
Yeah,
but they do count.
But they count, yeah, and they are 44% of the total for solar, which
Okay.
means that solar is almost always undercounted.
Absolutely.
So,
Got an interesting graph up here, and it's just about non-hydropower renewables,
yes,
comparing them with hydropower.
hydropower.
Which, as you can see, has pretty much been constant.
Yes,
It goes up and down with the seasons, but it's
Yes.
pretty much constant. And non-hydro renewables has been growing steadily,
right,
and it just has reached parity
yes.
right now.
And in the United States, renewables, including hydropower, have reached about 14%, a little bit less. And that means that they are pressing on the amount of electricity that we get from nuclear,
Yep.
and which is a little bit less than 20%, as I recall. So, and of course, they're not taking away from nuclear. We're seeing nuclear plants closed, but the renewables aren't throwing nuclear out of the marketplace so much as they're throwing coal out of the marketplace. So,
Yeah. Well, nuclear's thrown itself out of the market.
well, it'll take a while before
Oh, yeah.
nuclear
Well,
disappears.
we're going to talk about that a little bit later, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item from, I love the names of some of these publications, International Water, Power, and Dam Construction. The planned 1,300 megawatt Eagle Mountain Pumped Storage Project in California has received a license from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, paving the way for the project to go ahead. The pits at the mine will be modified to become water storage reservoirs.
I got a picture up there,
Yeah,
and pretty much all pump storage works the same way.
yeah,
The one down in Northfield works the same way.
Right.
As this exactly.
it's exactly the same thing, yes. Except that in this case, what they're doing is they're taking mountaintop that has been removed for the purpose
they're
of
making a reservoir up there.
it's an open pit mine, and it's
Yep.
and really, an open pit mine is not something that you have a lot of use for most of the time, but in this case it becomes valuable real estate.
Well, this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Should we explain to people how that works?
Yeah, we have already. But
We
let's
have, but
do
it won't
again
hurt.
because we got the picture up
We
there.
have the picture. And do you want to do that, or should I, Tom?
It doesn't matter. We
Okay.
both know what it's doing.
We know what it is. If you look on the lower right of that graphic, you see a reservoir. That could be a lake, or it could be a river, or it could be a reservoir that's dug for the purpose. And water from that reservoir is pumped up to the high reservoir that's in the upper left.
When power is cheap.
When power is cheap. And people who have power systems in their homes and are accustomed to the idea of paying 15 cents or 10 cents or whatever per kilowatt hour for electricity don't realize that the wholesale price of power fluctuates just hugely. And when the power is cheap, it can in fact go negative, so that it means that the owners of this system would be paid to pump storage water to the top, because somebody's got to do something with that excess power that's on the grid. Then when the price of power goes up, the water is allowed to run back down again and drive turbines producing power. And that happens typically on a daily basis in areas where the power is baseload. So that, because the baseload plants typically have to run 24 hours a day, regardless of whether any power is wanted or not, and so that they will be able to meet the peak demands during the daytime. And the nighttime demand for power is low, so you pump the water to the top. The daytime demand is high, so you run the water back down again to make power.
You think of this thing as a giant battery.
It's a big battery, that's right. And the one at Northfield Mountain, which is just 20 some odd miles down the river from Vermont Yankee, has an output that's 160% of the output of the Vermont Yankee plant.
That's not a coincidence.
Not a coincidence, no, it's not a coincidence. And it is big enough that one plant is big enough to supply almost all of the power for the state of Vermont. And it can store power from wind or solar just as easily as it can.
It doesn't care where the electrons
doesn't care, absolutely. Okay, that was from Ars Technica. Same day. I'm sorry, that was from International Water, Power, and Dam Construction. We're on to Sunday here, August 3rd. Edison Electric Institute, the power industry's main trade group, is calling on utilities to better promote electric cars in order to stimulate demand for electricity and help reverse trends that threaten long-term viability of some in the industry. This came from the Energy Collective.
I got a couple of graphs up there that show exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Came from that same article.
Yes.
If you look at the graph on the left,
Yes.
it's called demand growth.
Okay.
But what has happened in reality is demand reduction.
Right.
And that's caused by a number of things. I mean, the economy slowed down. Plants have moved to China. You never hear about this, but they don't buy electricity anymore
Yes.
from us. They buy them from China.
Yes.
And then, of course, there's people using efficiency at home.
Or putting power systems on their roofs.
Or generating their own power. So the demand for power has gone down tremendously.
Right.
And what they're saying is we got to do something because we're losing our revenue.
Right. And if they can switch this to switch their power output so that they're supplying power to cars, that gives them a market that they don't currently have.
Well, that's basically what this article is all about.
Right.
There's a graph in this article a little bit further down, and it says an interesting thing. Across a full day, that's 24-hour day,
Okay.
electric car households without solar use 58% more grid electricity than a typical household. Well, of course, they're charging their car.
They're charging their car.
You know.
Yeah, which they do at night when the cost of power is cheap.
Yeah. But this is the market that these guys have to rely on.
Yes.
They want to see more of this going on.
Yes, of course.
I don't blame them. It's good business.
Yep, absolutely. And one of the things that it's doing, and this is a very important issue, is it is reducing the demand for fossil fuels. So now what you're getting into is a situation where you've got utilities, some of the big utilities included, are butting heads with the fossil fuel industry that has been supplying them with fuel because they want to take over the job of fueling automobiles.
Well, you can say that it's well, what's the word I'm looking for? Selfish. But but selfish in a good way.
Yeah. This business about greed is good is something that just rubs me the wrong way. But in this particular case, I think you're right. It's self-interest.
Self-interest.
It's self-interest.
I should have used that
in
word.
this particular case, it's self-interest that can benefit everybody, as opposed to greed that benefits nobody except the self. And when you consider that the coal industry, for example, and the petroleum industry are causing the deaths of something like 5 million people a year. Do you remember what that figure was?
I don't remember the number.
Came from the World Health
Just
Organization.
a number, but it's a scary number.
It's a scary number. And people are dying of respiratory diseases. This is not nice. Anyway, that was from Ars Technica. Sorry, that was not from Ars Technica. That was from the Energy Collective. From Clean Technica, again on Sunday, August 3rd, Panasonic, Tesla's current lithium battery cell supplier, has now signed an agreement with Tesla on how the two will jointly carry out construction of the Gigafactory. This is
an interesting development. We got the brains from Tesla, and we got the brawn from Panasonic.
Yeah.
Putting their attributes together.
Yep.
To make a very large battery production facility.
Right.
That's basically going to be oriented toward cars.
Well,
But there's going to be some fallout from it.
Well, really, Elon Musk had said this is not just for cars.
No, not just for cars.
This is for grid storage and household storage, and it's a $5 billion factory. And by the way, the market capitalization for Tesla is 60% of the market capitalization for GM.
Is it really?
Or at least it was the last time I looked, which was actually several weeks ago, so I could be off on that. But that's kind of an amazing figure.
I wouldn't have thought it was anywhere near that.
Well, market capitalization is the number of shares times the price per share. So what this means is that Tesla stock on a share-by-share basis is highly valued compared to GM stock.
Okay.
And I believe the market capitalization of Tesla is bigger than the market capitalization of Ford. So we're talking about an industry which is getting very big, and
Tesla doesn't even want to be in the car market.
That's actually, I think, quite possible. They'd much rather just be building parts and selling them to GM and Ford and anybody else.
True.
Yeah, really kind of.
That's an observation, but I think it's true.
Yep. The next item, and here we go. This is from the Chicago Daily Herald. Dismantling the San Onofre nuclear power plant in Southern California will take 2 decades and cost $4.4 billion.
That's a lot of shekels.
Ooh, man, I'll tell you. But spent radioactive fuel will be held at the site indefinitely, according to a game plan from Southern California Edison.
They got no place else to put it.
Well, of course they've got no place to put it. It's got to be held there because the federal government hasn't made good on its 50-year-old promise to come up with a storage solution for the...
This is the most expensive decommissioning in the 70-year history of the nuclear power industry.
Yeah, but it's probably not going to be the most expensive forever.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Now, just so people understand what's going on here, several years ago, Southern California Edison, well, the owners, because they're not the only owner of this plant, the owners of the San Onofre plant realized that they needed to replace their steam generators. So what they did was they hired Mitsubishi to give them new steam generators. And Mitsubishi did some design changes that made the steam generators better, according to them. And they said, well, these are drop-in replacements for the old steam generators, so you don't even have to worry about getting any permission from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Oh.
And that idea went to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission accepted it. And then
that's interesting.
Yeah, and when the steam generators were about 1.5 years old, one of them all of a sudden started leaking.
Uh-oh.
leaking material that was putting tiny amounts of radioactive material into the environment. And really, in a steam generator, you kind of expect that after many years. But that's when the steam generator should be replaced. It's when it really starts leaking. You can stop the leaks by opening up all your stuff and finding them and plugging up the
chewing gum
tubes.
here.
Yeah, it's a little chewing gum and a little baling wire and such what. But they had something like, I forget what the percentage was, but it was a huge percentage of these things. It was clear that those steam generators were not going to last. So it was necessary to figure out what they were going to do about it. And as far as I know, they and Mitsubishi are still in the process of figuring out which one is going to win which lawsuit. And so it's a huge mess. But two nuclear reactors were taken offline in
There
2013 because the steam generators were badly replaced. And of course, the same year, the Crystal River plant went down because the owners of Crystal River decided that they were going to do their own job of opening up the containment to put in a new steam generator, as I recall.
Uh-oh.
But they opened the containment, which is like I don't know how much money. They were saving $65 million by doing it themselves instead of bringing in people with experience.
Sounds like it was a good decision.
Yeah, great decision. The containment cracked in ways that were not exactly acceptable. And so they were faced with the problem of, are we going to spend over $1 billion building one of those domes you see there is essentially what it is.
I love the picture of these people frolicking on the beach right next to the nuclear power plant.
Yeah, well.
By the way, you got any idea who Santa Onofre was?
No, I don't.
Onofre in English is Humphrey.
Oh, okay. Whoever
I didn't
that
know there
is.
was a St. Humphrey, but there must have been.
There has almost
Obviously
any name
was.
you can come up with. There's at
a
least
saint
one
for it.
saint. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The next item from the Sydney Morning Herald. We got a lot of items today. This is Monday, August 4th. About 25% of Australian power generation profits come from supplying power 0.4% of the time at peak prices. We were talking about peak prices before. This is really remarkable. Renewable resources are destroying that profitability. Why? Because that 0.4% of the time
It's a quarter of their power.
it's a quarter of their profit, but
Wow.
it's right at the time solar power is being produced. So
They're not happy.
They're not happy. Yeah, 10% of the households in Australia have got solar power, as I recall.
We don't notice this because we're buying the power at a fixed price.
Yes.
But as you already mentioned in this particular issue, wholesale price of power is a very different animal.
It is. And, I've mentioned this before. The lowest price I have seen come up in the news for wholesale power is negative $100 per megawatt hour, which is...
They're paying you $100 to take it.
Yes. Which
That's a
is
good business to be in.
negative 10 cents per...
That's a very good business
if
to
you,
be in.
yeah, but you have to be buying lots of power. The highest price I've seen for electric power is $11,000 per megawatt hour. And that
For a
happened...
very short period of time.
Yeah. That happened because a 700 megawatt coal burning plant in Western Australia suddenly, unexpectedly went offline. So if you think about variable power from solar and wind and the mess that makes for the power grid, we talked about this last week, and you compare that with a mess that's made when a baseload power plant goes down, a wind turbine going offline, a wind farm going offline is not going to make much difference.
Nope.
But a coal burning or gas burning or nuclear powered plant going offline, which they do unexpectedly, nuclear power plants do that all the time. I see a couple of instances of that happening almost every week, where they go down because some part has got a problem and they've got to shut the plant down to replace it. And the part very often is something that has nothing to do with safety. It's a bearing in the generator or something like that. They have to take the thing offline. And when that happens, it has an effect on wholesale prices. The next item, still Monday, from Clean Technica, the US DOE has just teamed up with the EPA and Department of Agriculture to announce a new initiative for ramping up manure to biogas at dairy farms and other farming operations, and this is called the Biogas Opportunities Roadmap.
It's cow power.
Oh my goodness gracious, look at that.
It's that real picture isn't as obscene as it looks.
Okay.
It's a right and left
Yes.
view of the same thing combined.
I can see that.
So what you're seeing in the middle is not what it appears to be.
It looks very, I don't know what it appears to be.
Looks like a cow's butt to me.
Yeah, but it's facing in both directions.
It sort of is, but it's two.
This
it's
is
parts
very
of
symmetric.
two cows facing
There are a
in each
couple
direction.
hundred of these plants running in the United States right now. And as a matter of fact, I don't remember what the number is in Vermont, but there are a number of them in Vermont. They're all small.
Individually, they're not big, right?
They're not big. They can run on a single dairy farm that has 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 cattle. But what it means is that the manure from the farm, which is also mixed with other agricultural waste, is turned into two things. One of them is electricity. Actually, one of them is biogas that is burned for electricity. The other one is compost, which can be used on the fields.
Yep.
Burning the biogas for electricity reduces the amount of methane that's put into the air, it increases carbon dioxide, but the result is considered beneficial for the environment because methane is really bad. They're saying that they want to have 11,000 of these things, 11,000 small power plants online in the United States. And if you figure, 11,000 at, let's just say, a megawatt each, that's 11,000.
That's 11 gigawatts.
It's 11 gigawatts. It's the equivalent.
Nothing to sneeze at.
It's the equivalent of 11 nuclear power plants. Yeah. And each one of them is generating revenues for the owner of the farm. So this is something that I think is interesting.
Well, in this particular article, they're talking about one county
Yep.
in Wisconsin, which has almost 9,000 households.
Yeah.
And they're saying if the number of farms that they have now went to this, plus a little bit of extra distributed solar and or wind, they can power the entire county.
The entire county. Yeah. Well, Wisconsin, as I recall, has more cattle than people. I might be wrong about that.
Vermont used to be that way.
Well, Vermont used to be that way, but anyway, the next item also on Monday from the Business Spectator. Rather than resisting climate change, San Diego Gas and Electric has been working with the Environmental Defense Fund, that's a nonprofit organization, and others at the Rocky Mountain Institute's eLab Accelerator to explore a vision of a future with even greater quantities of distributed energy resources. So San Diego Gas and Electric is looking into how to take advantage of renewable energy.
Exactly.
And this is
again one of the more forward-looking utilities.
Right.
I got all sorts of stuff on this, but I don't want to read them all.
Okay. Have you got anything in particular that strikes you? You're allowed to say no.
I'm just looking here quickly.
Okay.
I don't think so. Nothing worth itemizing.
All right. We've got the next three items come from Tuesday, August 5th. And I'm going to read the three of them off, and then you can figure out what you want to do about graphics as I'm doing this.
Okay, I got some good graphics on
because
this one.
these things really belong together. The first, from news.com.au, which places it in Australia, Beijing will stop using coal and close coal-fired power plants and other coal facilities in 6 of its capital districts by 2020. With pollution in Beijing reaching levels that are more than double what is considered hazardous. The country is increasingly installing clean wind and solar power. This is the same day, ecobusiness.com. India will provide low-cost loans and grants to set up solar power parks across the country to host as much as 20 gigawatts of capacity, about 10 times what has been built to date. The parks will host large plants ranging between 500 megawatts and a gigawatt, and that they will be connected to the grid. That means that you can have several solar farms in the same solar park.
Exactly.
And those parks, by the way, as I think you've pointed out before, are mostly, or perhaps all, put in desert areas.
They are.
A lot of desert in India.
And they're very large.
And they're very big. Then the next one is, as Australia's federal government commits to a future on the dependent on the nation's vast coal resource, two of the countries upon which this shaky economic plan is most dependent, India and China, look to be closing the door on the heavy polluting fossil fuel. Tony Abbott has bet the farm on coal, and it looks like he's going to lose the bet badly.
I think you hit the nail right on the head.
So you have interesting stuff to show us about
Yeah, I
this.
got some good pictures here of China.
China,
Let
okay.
me pull it up.
Let me guess. One of them is pollution.
They're all pollution.
Oh dear, look at
Look at
that.
this one. This is Beijing.
That's Beijing. That is not because somebody's burning leaves off to the side of the picture. That's because there are coal plants that are burning coal at some distance from the picture. And that's a problem. People are, I keep coming back to this thing of 7-year-old children being diagnosed with lung cancer of the types that are caused by cigarettes.
Yeah.
Because of the pollution. There's a pollution index that the United States Embassy has got, I think it's the US Embassy, that rates 150 as not good and 300 as hazardous. And the number in Beijing has gone as high as 750. So they're talking about 2.5 times the level that's hazardous.
I think it's even more than that.
It might be, but that looks
This is
deadly.
Tiananmen Square, by the way.
Yeah,
I got some other pictures. All of these are
All
in
of
China.
them are scary. Look
This
at
is
that.
Beijing on the left.
Yeah,
And on the right, well, I think the right one, that's also Beijing.
people-
That's from cars.
it's
from everything.
It's from everything, but a lot of that pollution is. If it were just the cars, the blue sky would be blue. That's a lot of that is from coal, and those
Here's
poor
a picture
people
of
are
coal.
breathing.
On the left is a coal generator,
Yeah,
coal smoke. And on the right, this is almost normal. I mean, almost good. I mean, this is a light smog day.
right.
Look at that pickup truck that guy's got.
Yeah. I just did a story for Green Energy Times about a young woman who has got pedal-powered pickup trucks in Boston.
Oh yeah.
They had a show in Brattleboro this last week
Yeah.
called Power to the Pedal.
Yep.
Power to the Pedals, plural.
Dave Cohen.
Dave Cohen
Yeah.
sponsored it, or
Yeah.
he helped with it.
Yeah.
But he wasn't really directly connected with making the show. But it was a wonderful show about this young woman who put together a pedal-powered delivery operation in Boston, and she has, among other things, won a contract to pick up recycling bin contents from road public place.
Yeah, doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, and it's like the person with a tricycle pedals up to this thing and takes it and empties it out and takes it.
If you look carefully at that picture, the
Yeah.
guy in the front of the pickup truck there has an electric bike.
Oh, it's electric assist probably. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You can
Yeah.
see the motor in the rear wheel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, let's see
Okay.
what else I got here? I got the Indian picture there. We'll mention that real briefly. I mean,
Okay.
The new government of India
Yes.
is making a real good
Big effort. Yeah.
to bring power to the people,
Yes.
to bring power to remote areas
Yes.
of the people.
Yes.
And it looks good. I mean, some of these things are very large projects.
Yes.
And
Well,
they're
huge
bringing them-
actually. Huge
Yeah.
projects.
And they're bringing them to places where people never had power before.
Right, and if you consider how big this is, the largest of the projects that they're trying to get put in are almost half the output of the entire nation's grid-tied PV system today. So
Say that again. That one,
all
I'm
right,
having a hard
they have about 2 gigawatts. I should say it's
Something
more
like
than
that.
2
Okay.
gigawatts of power that is grid tied in India today. They have a lot of PV power that is not grid tied, and that's becoming more and more important because it's giving power to people who never had it.
Exactly. This is distributed.
This is distributed.
But now they're talking about centralized.
They're talking
solar.
about centralized solar, and they're trying to get that into these solar parks that we mentioned earlier. And the largest solar farms, which would be individual operations within the parks, the largest solar farms that they're talking about putting up are a gigawatt. Mm-hmm. And a gigawatt is almost half of the amount of power they've got grid tied today. So they're talking about expanding the amount of solar power that they've got just grid tied by about 500%, 1,000% in the next 6 or 8 years.
From the standpoint of electricity, you can say they're moving from the 19th century to the 21st without stopping.
I absolutely agree with that. I absolutely agree. That's a pretty good statement of
We got
what's
a little
going
graph here of. This is just one part of Australia, but it shows where it's from Newcastle Port,
on. Okay.
and it shows where the power is going.
You notice.
China is getting 25% of it.
Yeah.
India is only getting a small part of it, just from this particular.
Well, the Indians don't have good port facilities to offload
Well, they don't.
ships.
They don't. But this is also far from India. It's on the far side of Australia from India.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What is interesting is Japan's getting almost half of it. They don't even mention it.
But the Japanese are doing that because they've shut
They
off
shut off their nuclear.
all their
Yep.
nuclear power plants. Okay. The next item comes from Platts. 3 members of the Massachusetts Global Warming Solutions Act Implementation Advisory Committee, that's a long title, resigned and criticized the administration's support of a bill that could lead to the construction of a natural gas pipeline across the state.
There's a picture of it right up there.
I think that's
the
significant.
red line is the new
Yeah,
one.
I think that's very significant.
Well, I was down in Northfield yesterday,
Yes,
and there's a lot of opposition to this pipeline in Northfield.
I believe it.
And Northfield on that particular map is just about over the sea in Massachusetts.
Yes,
And there's a little jog there.
yes.
And if you look at it, it's pointing right at Vernon, Vermont.
Well, yeah, there you go.
And there's a little bit of a hidden agenda there, I think.
Well, yeah, there are people talking about putting a natural gas plant in Vernon
Absolutely.
to take up some of the load that
Yeah.
Vermont Yankee is losing. Although there are other plans that are being
Well, I know
suggested.
I've been reading about all across Western Mass they're opposing this pipeline.
Well, of course they are. Why would anybody want a natural gas pipeline in his backyard? What can we say? Should we move on?
Yep.
Okay, Wednesday, August 6th, this is yesterday, a message from energy ministers as part of the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit was that coal and natural gas will have to dominate the continent's near future, even as officials also emphasized how deeply threatened the region is by climate change. That from Environmental and Energy Publishing.
Well, you know, I may not agree with what they're doing, but I think it's real politics. I think they have to do it this way.
The thing that bothers me about this is that when you're going to baseload power,
Yeah.
which could be from natural gas or coal or nuclear,
Or hydro.
you're talking or hydro. You're talking about a big investment.
That's for sure.
If you're talking about anything that is not hydro, you're talking about a lot of money going into fuel and other things. The investment at this point that they would have to make if they went into solar and wind would be smaller,
Much smaller.
and it would I think be a much better future for them.
Well, we also have to figure out that part of the reality is that just like everywhere, there are elites.
This is true, and as a matter of fact, today in the news they were talking about the fact that only 8% of the people who live in rural areas of sub-Saharan Africa have electricity.
Have any electricity at
Which
all.
means that their lives would be substantially changed by the introduction of distributed solar power.
Just enough to power a couple of light bulbs, and a kid can do
Absolutely.
homework at night without
Absolutely.
lighting a match.
A big deal.
This is an interesting picture here.
Okay.
This particular guy's a rock star down there.
Okay.
And he is very active in this. He's doing some really good stuff.
Yeah.
He's taking, he must be a pretty wealthy man for Africa. And he's taking his wealth and he's putting it to the benefit of the people. It's called Acon. His name, his performance name is Acon.
Okay.
So it's Acon Lighting in Africa. Acon Lighting Africa. He hopes to bring electricity to 1 million households by the end of 2014. That's now.
That's a lot of households. Just think about that. In Africa, I would bet the family size is bigger than 5 people.
I would bet.
And that means that maybe something in excess of 5 million people would get power just because this guy is providing it to them.
Here's a good quote. He's calling on investors to take advantage of the continent's most freely available resource, the sun.
Yes.
Africa will never run out of sun. Our
Probably
energy
not.
is right there in front of us. Why
Yes.
not use it?
Yes. We have 5 more items to cover in the next 13 minutes, so I think
I think we can do it.
we can do it, yep. That was, the next item is from minpost.com. At best, nuclear power accounted for only 10.8% of the world's electricity last year, down from a peak of 17.6% in 1996. That's a huge drop.
Well, one of the reasons they give, the world's reactor fleet is aging.
Yes,
And new projects are burdened by high costs and construction delays.
absolutely. This is, it's interesting to see that happen. And I don't know where the nuclear industry is going to be able to pull a rabbit out of a hat to make this change. Now they're talking about small modular reactors, but I just don't think
That's
I think it's a pipe
I
dream.
wouldn't buy stock in that.
No, I
those
wouldn't either.
companies.
Yeah.
Got a picture here. I'm going to bring up.
Okay.
It's the nuclear share of electricity production worldwide by country in 2013 and 2012. And
So the dark bars are 20.
dark bars is 2013. The light bars is 2012.
Wow, look
Or
at
it's
that.
actually the light bars could be previous to that. It's the maximum.
Okay, it's the
There's
maximum.
another bar in
maximum
there that
before
we can't really see very well. Is 2012.
Okay, now the one that's all the way to the right there that has
That's Iran.
That's Iran.
They're not getting any. They don't have any at all.
Wow.
The one right next to that is Japan, where they shut all the nuclear ones down.
Oh, I see. So the high bar there is Japan.
No, yeah, the high bar is Japan.
The high bar is Japan.
And you
All
can
right.
see it's
but
all
but,
light color.
But there are a bunch of other places where it looks like nuclear power has been cut by a third to a half.
Well, yeah.
One of them obviously is
Germany.
Germany. Yeah. Okay.
South Korea is another one.
Yeah, the South Koreans have had a lot of trouble with nuclear power in the last couple of
Have
years.
they?
Yeah, they've had a series of scandals come up because it turned out that somebody was supplying parts to the nuclear power plants that had never been approved, and those parts came with approval certificates that were forged.
Okay.
So nuclear power plants were being shut down in order to get those parts out and replaced. It's just a matter of corruption, but you know it gets affected by that. The next item is from the Long Island Exchange. Environment New York Research and Policy Center released a report showing strong solar growth across the nation, including a 30% growth in New York in 2013. The report says effective state and local public policy is more important than the quality of the sunlight.
Well, that's what this article is basically about. Again, from the article, it is not the availability of sunlight that makes the states solar leaders, but the degree to which the state and local governments have created effective public policy to help capture the virtually unlimited pollution-free energy from the sun.
Right. One of the things that's interesting about this that was explained to me is that you would think that Arizona and Southern California and so forth would be solar leaders, which they are. But the putting in solar in Vermont is not such a bad idea because one of the things that makes solar panels inefficient is high temperatures.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so the
low
solar,
temperature sun
yeah,
is more efficient.
that's right. And so our capacity factor in Vermont is not as high as down there, but it's not as bad as you might think.
Well, the Germans are showing us that.
Absolutely, they are. There is not 1 square inch of Germany that is farther south than the northernmost border of Vermont.
Okay.
And they're doing this thing with solar. It's really interesting to see.
I got an
And not
interesting
only
picture
that,
here.
they've got a rather wet and cloudy environment to
Yeah.
get solar from.
I
What's
threw
the
this picture in there because it really intrigues me. This is not New York, it's New Jersey.
Okay.
And a power company there, it's called Public Service Electric and Gas.
Okay.
And if you look at it, there is a solar panel on a power pole.
Yes.
And apparently they're putting these things all over the place.
Yes.
They're not saying anything to anybody. They're not looking for permits because they're too small. They're just putting them up. And I can't think of any kind of power to be more distributed than this.
Yeah.
However, it's distributed power, but it's centrally owned.
That's
I
interesting.
don't know what that really means.
We're in a changing world,
but
you know.
That is exactly the message. We're in a changing world.
We're in a changing
Yep.
world. Now we've got 3 news items from today. The first of them is from Japan today. The long-awaited restart of Japan's nuclear power plants is facing yet another setback and may be delayed until 2015, according to Japanese media. And this is putting pressure on struggling utilities to push for fresh price hikes. They're just having trouble after trouble trying to get those nuclear plants going. And this is not because of protests or the fact that the overwhelming majority of people in Japan don't want them running. It's for other reasons.
Well, they're paying more for power that they're distributing to the people.
Yeah.
And they're losing money on the deal.
This is not an easy time for the Japanese
No,
utilities.
not at all. And I think we discussed this. The Japanese utility industry is owned by a very small number of very large companies
Yes.
with a lot of influence.
Yes, yes. Though almost every large company in Japan is affiliated with, I think it's 6 big organizations.
Exactly. Something like 6, yeah.
Yeah,
And they control everything. And all of them are household words over here.
yeah. Mitsubishi is one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, NUVO Newsweekly is the source of the next item. The state of Indiana last week joined 10 other states and the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I guess Kentucky isn't a state.
Massachusetts is a Commonwealth, too.
I know it is.
And Virginia?
Yeah.
I don't know what the difference is.
I don't think anybody else does either. In a lawsuit challenging the legality of the U.S. EPA's new Clean Power Plan, which aims to achieve targeted reductions in carbon emissions from coal-fired power plants. And that is not a surprise to me.
I'm trying to find.
You're trying to find something?
I'm trying to find my mouse. Yeah.
Ah, your mouse.
Well, what's going on here? And they say it in the article. It's politics. It's clearly politics.
Yeah.
And there's an accompanying article which I read that goes into real detail about exactly that.
Yes.
It's a big mistake what they're doing.
Well, they're trying to do, one of the things that I think is clear, it's absolutely clear, is that we have very, very powerful organizations that want to maintain their profits.
Bingo.
And
absolutely.
the fossil fuel industries and all of the utilities that are 100% or close to 100% dependent on the fossil fuel industries are going to fight tooth and nail to maintain those profits. Just think about the fact that the direct subsidies that the fossil fuel industry gets worldwide is in excess of $500 billion a year.
Okay.
And the direct plus indirect subsidies, and this is according to the World Bank, the direct and indirect subsidies that they are getting amounts to almost $2 trillion a year. It's $1.9 trillion according to the World Bank. That's a lot of money to lose. That's a lot, and that's not their income. That's not their profit. That's just the subsidies.
Just the subsidies.
Just the
Okay.
subsidies.
I know they're big. I mean,
And
I
if we
know
took
we've
those
talked about the
subsidies,
oil depletion
right?
allowance.
If we took those subsidies away from them, we could finance just with those subsidies 100% of a changeover to renewable power that's needed to combat global warming.
An interesting picture up here about exactly that. And the message here in the article is that, these guys are totally ignoring the effects, the economic effects
And
in Indiana cause of global warming.
Right.
That's what this picture is.
Okay.
And this picture showing the economic effects from north to south in the state due to increased temperature and humidity.
Oh my gosh.
What effect it will have on crops.
And that's just global warming.
Yeah.
This says nothing about the 6 million people a year, or whatever the number is. I know that it's in the millions who die as a result of asthma and things like that,
No,
or cancer coming from
in this
fossil
particular
fuels.
case, they're just looking at the crop damage
Oh my gosh.
and the economic effects of the crop damage.
Oh.
So while on the one hand they're making money, on the other hand, somebody's
They're
losing money.
costing people a lot of money. If you put their subsidies together with the damage they're doing, it's about double that $2 trillion.
That's the
a year.
message here.
Yeah.
But there's different people involved.
Yeah.
I guess you could say that the profits are narrow and the losses are wide.
Well, basically, what's happening is we're seeing big organizations start to take this seriously. General Motors, for example, signed a letter sent to over 60 national governments asking for them to do something about climate change
And really
reduce carbon emissions.
For real reasons of self-interest.
Yes. Yep. I want my kids to stay alive until they grow old. Is part of that self-interest. But we have
I was just thinking of the economic self-interest.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are also people.
They are people. Yes. Even the people who run GM are people. Actually, even the people who run Entergy or Exelon, or you can pick whatever the BHP Bulletin, which is
What was that guy down in Texas? I think he was from Exelon, where he's like the president or executive.
Oh
vice
yes,
president,
who didn't want
fracking
fracking done? Was that it?
I think it was fracking. Yeah, in his neighborhood.
What can you say? And here is our last item, and we're coming down to the wire here. Conservative groups failed Tuesday in a combined effort to unseat several moderate House Republicans, despite a flood of negative mail in the final weeks of the campaign. All of the targeted members appear to have survived their primary challenges, several by wide margins. And I didn't put it in here, but I should have said these were in Kansas.
It is in Kansas.
Yeah.
The picture there is in Kansas.
Yes.
I had to scratch to find the picture.
Well, but it's interesting to me that the Tea Party and various organizations like that, which are, of course, very much doing things, whether they're thinking about it or not, and I suspect that it's because of thoughtless actions.
Well, here's what these guys
They're
did.
supporting
I don't
the fossil
blame
fuel industry.
I don't blame them. The Flyers charged this is what they did. Look, the moderates had helped advance President Obama's radical agenda.
Yes, radical agenda.
By voting against measures that block parts of the Affordable Care Act and repeal the state's energy renewable standards. They were trying to repeal them, and these guys voted against it.
Yes.
And, you're not supposed to do that.
You're not supposed to do that. We've got just a few seconds, so I think we better say goodbye to everybody who have tuned in on Channel 10.
Yeah, we got 13 seconds according to that one. I'm not even up there to say goodbye.
You're not even up there to say goodbye.
Here I am.
Ah, there you are.
Goodbye.
Okay. Okay. We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. We dig and drill and waste what we find, break up the earth, leaving little behind, but we will grow lilies in the by and by. I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.